Hello, I'm Andrew from Growing Chefs Ontario. In today's video, we're going to explore food preservation together. Throughout, I'll let you know when you should pause the video so that you can brainstorm answers to the questions on your worksheets. If you haven't already filled out the first question asking you to list all the food preservation methods you can think of, and foods that have been preserved using those methods, please pause the video now before I give the answers away. Now, let's get started. The astonishing fact about food preservation is that it's permeated every culture at nearly every moment in time. To survive, ancient humans had to harness nature. In frozen climates, they froze meat on the ice. In tropical climates, they dried foods in the sun. Food by its nature begins to spoil the moment it's harvested. Food preservation enabled ancient humans to make roots and live in one place and form communities. They no longer had to consume the kill or harvest immediately, but could preserve some for later use. Each culture preserved their local food sources using the same basic methods of food preservation. This quote is from Brian A. Newmer, who explored the historical origins of food, just like we will today. Food preservation started thousands of years ago. Cooling, freezing, fermenting, salting, smoking, and sun-drying are a few age-old food preservation techniques. All these processes have been used for generations. They allow us to safely store summer's bountiful food for times when fresh foods aren't available, such as in, through, cold or dry seasons. Can you guess how the corn in the photo, a staple food for many indigenous cultures across the globe, was preserved? Food preservation consists of the application of science-based knowledge through a variety of available technologies and procedures to prevent deterioration and spoilage of food products and extend their shelf life, while assuring consumers a product free of pathogenic microorganisms. This quote is from M. F. Sancho Madriz in the Encyclopedia of Food Sciences and Nutrition. Essentially, each preservation method involves various scientific processes, all of which work towards the same goal: preserving foods to limit the growth of microorganisms and to slow down decomposition and rancidification processes. There are a number of processes that cultures across the world discovered and eventually perfected in order to preserve various foods. We will explore some common preservation methods today, including the history of the methods, what the scientific process involves, as well as some examples of common foods we eat that are preserved using each method. The photo you see here is of both fresh and preserved cocoa beans that will later be turned into chocolate. Can you guess how cocoa beans are preserved and processed? Sometimes multiple preservation methods are used for one product. The first preservation method we're learning about today is drying or dehydrating. On your worksheet, you can fill in the blank for each number with the name of the preservation method. Drying is a method of food preservation that removes enough moisture from the food so bacteria, yeast, and mold cannot grow. Foods can be dried in the sun, in an oven, or in a food dehydrator by using the right combination of warm temperatures, low humidity, and air current. In ancient times, and in some parts of the world currently, the sun and wind were and are used to naturally dry foods. Evidence shows that Middle East and East Asian cultures actively dried foods as early as 12,000 BC. In Canada, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples used and still use drying as a way to process and store foods such as fruits, root vegetables, and seaweed. These harvesting and processing activities were, and still are, occasions for cultural learning as well as healthy land-based exercise. Pemmican is an example of a recipe made from dried meat, tallow, and sometimes berries. What are some common dried foods we eat today? Take a moment to pause the video and write down your answers. Try not to only list the images you see up on the screen right now, and think up some new ones. Some examples include raisins, banana chips, beef jerky, herbs, flour, oats, pasta, and rice. Even the corn and the cocoa beans that we saw earlier in the video were dried. So let's move on to our next method. Freezing keeps food safe by slowing the movement of molecules, causing microbes to enter a dormant stage. Freezing preserves foods for extended periods because it prevents the growth of microorganisms that cause both food spoilage and foodborne illness. In what we now call Canada, Inuit and First Nation communities in the north traditionally hunted and froze seal meat on the ice. This practice is still practiced today. In the late 1800s, quick freezing was invented, where food was frozen quickly at very low temperatures for better tasting meats and vegetables. What are some frozen foods we eat today? Take a moment to pause the video and write down your answers. Some examples of frozen foods include corn, peas, and other vegetables, bananas, berries, and other fruit, chicken, sausage, and other meats, ice cream, pizza, and prepared meals. In fact, you can freeze almost anything. Fermentation is an anaerobic process in which microorganisms like yeast and bacteria break down food components, for example, sugars, such as glucose, into other products, for example, organic acids, gases, or alcohol. This gives fermented foods their unique and desirable taste, aroma, texture, and appearance. The fermentation process involves the oxidization of carbohydrates to generate a range of products. Such products have a preservative effect by limiting the growth of spoilage or pathogenic microbiota in the food. Fermentation was not invented, but rather discovered. There is evidence of humans fermenting foods, like making yogurts and other fermented dairy products from camel, goat, and sheep's milk, as well as making alcohol and beer out of fermented barleys and grains as far back as 10,000 BC. What are some fermented foods we eat today? Some of them may surprise you. Take a moment to pause the video and write down your answers. Some examples of fermented foods include soy sauce, yogurt, some cheeses, kimchi, sauerkraut, kombucha, and sourdough breads. Even the cocoa beans we talked about earlier are fermented before drying. Pickling is the process of preserving or extending the shelf life of food by either anaerobic fermentation in brine or an immersion in vinegar. The pickling procedure typically affects the food's texture and flavor. Pickling is used to prevent bad bacteria from growing in the food. When you use vinegar to pickle, the high acidity of the vinegar prevents most bacteria from thriving, thus preserving the food as long as it is submerged in the vinegar solution. Pickling may have originated when food was placed in wine or beer to preserve it, since both have a low pH. There was a significant increase in food preservation in the 16th century, owing to the arrival in Europe of new types of foods. Now, I don't want to spoil the answer to the question, so we'll discuss those foods after you have a chance to pause the video and think of some pickled foods we ate today. Like I mentioned, there was a significant increase in food preservation in the 16th century owing to the arrival in Europe of new types of food. Ketchup was an oriental fish brine that traveled the spice route to Europe and eventually to America, where, eventually, sugar was added to it, creating the ketchup we know today. Spices were added to these pickling sauces to make clever recipes, and soon, chutneys, relishes, mustards, and ketchups were commonplace. Onions, peppers, eggs, and radishes are all also commonly pickled. Smoking in food processing is the exposure of meat, fish, and other products to smoke for the purposes of preserving them and increasing their palatability by adding flavor and imparting a rich brown color. The drying action of the smoke tends to preserve the meat, though many of the chemicals present in wood smoke, like formaldehyde and certain alcohols, are natural preservatives as well. Smoking is one of the oldest methods of food preservation, probably having arisen shortly after the development of cooking with fire. You can pause the video to think of some smoked foods we eat today. The practice of smoking attained high levels of sophistication in several cultures, notably the smoking of fish in Scandinavia and northwestern North America, and the production of smoked hams in Europe and the United States. Brisket, some cheeses, and paprika and other spices can also be smoked. Curing is a method of preserving food, usually meat or fish, to prevent spoilage. Food can be cured by brining, which is soaking food in a saltwater solution, or salting, which is packing food in salt. What are some cured foods we eat today? Please pause the video now to record your answers. Salt is a common food preservative favored because it naturally inhibits most bacteria and fungal growth. Salting and brining are also ancient methods of food preservation. Some of the earliest evidence of salt processing dates to around 6000 BC. Ham, bacon, duck, fish, called lox, eggs, cheese, and vegetables can be salted through dry cures or wet brines for either short or extended periods to achieve the desired results. Canning is the process of placing foods in jars or cans and heating properly to a specified temperature, and is a way to preserve many different foods. The high heat destroys microorganisms and inactivates enzymes to preserve the safety and the quality of the food. Canning is one of the newest of the food preservation methods, being pioneered in the late 1700s in France. What are some canned foods we eat today? Please pause the video, and no, this is our last question. Canned foods can include peaches and many other fruits, peas and many other vegetables, soups, salsas, jams, tuna, fish and meats, and beans. To conclude our video, many historians believe that food preservation not only played an important role in community sustenance, but also cultural traditions and cultural identity. There are numerous special occasions in many different cultures where preserved foods play religious or celebratory roles in traditions and celebrations. We owe many of our current favorite foods to the resourcefulness, innovation, and ingenuity of indigenous cultures across the globe. For example, in this photo, you see wild rice, which has been cultivated and harvested by First Nations and Métis people for generations. It has an immense historical, spiritual, and cultural importance. Wild rice is traditionally dried, sometimes by exposing the rice to fire, sometimes through slow roasting. I encourage you to research a preserved food you are interested in and find out the history and the science behind its preservation. Thanks for exploring food preservation today with us. If you'd like to learn more, we've included the references used in researching for this lesson here. As well, you can visit growingchefsontario.ca for recipe videos, more resources and lesson plans, and lots of other fun ways to explore food education. We hope to see you soon.